Yeah, let's get started. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming out in the dark and the rain to talk about this. We're glad to be back. We had kind of a break with the holidays, and then we were traveling, and then when I was all ready to get back, I got the flu. So here we are, healthy and ready to go. So we're glad to be back. Ooh, what's that? Is that you? That's you. Okay, so let's get started with our prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Lord Jesus Christ, open the eyes of my heart that I may hear your word and understand and do your will, for I am a sojourner upon the earth. Hide not your commandments from me, but open my eyes that I may perceive the wonders of your law. Speak unto me the hidden and secret things of your wisdom. On you do I set my hope, O my God, that you shall enlighten my mind and understanding with the light of your knowledge, not only to cherish those things which are written, but to do them. For you are the enlightenment of those who lie in darkness, and from you comes every good deed and every gift. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. So since it's been a while since we were together, and we don't really do much of Mark during the Advent and Christmas season for obvious reasons, since there's no infancy narrative, we thought we would start today by just kind of turning to each other for a few minutes and recollecting and reminding ourselves what some of the things are that we've learned so far about Mark, or some of the things that have stuck with us or resonated with us over these first 5 chapters that we've been doing. So let's just take a few minutes together to remind ourselves, what did we learn? What do we remember? What has been interesting or surprising or about Mark? All right, so let's start with that.
Can everybody hear? Can you hear him okay? So the idea is let's just kind of take a moment here at the start to reflect on what do we remember about Mark, what are the themes that we found in those first 5 chapters, particularly kind of grabbing. Testing. Is that on?
Testing.
Maybe we should both work around the...
It's still kind of quiet, maybe.
I'll keep bringing it up.
Okay.
You should come see how complicated it is, Mark. It's 2 dials. Hey, Al, can you hear this?
Okay.
All right.
All right, good.
And this one, we get...
Because maybe the mics are close?
Yeah, maybe we should just, or maybe let's just kind of pass that one for now.
Jeez, I'm sorry, guys.
No, it's no problem.
Otherwise, I keep turning the game down on that some more.
I think we'll just
try to use that
we can pass it back and forth, stand together. No problem.
Yeah,
All right. So what are some of the things that you that came to mind as you reflected back on Mark? What are some of the interesting or unusual or characteristic things about Mark? He brought the church into Egypt. Yes, we talked about Egypt. Did you want to show?
Sure. And that's actually a perfect segue for, we'll come back to what you saw about, remember about Mark, but in Egypt, that's part of where we were in December.
We were traveling to Egypt.
And so we both had Mark on our minds, so we were constantly thinking of it. And we went to one church, and you'll see there from this picture, this was in a church, and you've got a guy standing there, and he's got a lion next to them. And you might say, well, that's kind of weird. He's got a lion. But remember, that's his symbol, is the lion. So it's just meant to cue us off that we're sitting here with Mark. Then you've got that lighthouse. That was one of the wonders of the world at the time, and in Alexandria. And then you got a guy being beaten and dragged by a horse, and that's the traditional. Again, this is all kind of the traditional story, but traditionally, Mark was martyred in Egypt as well by Roman soldiers, and so he's being dragged and beaten. So Mark seems like he's a kind of a gospel writer for us, but in Egypt, he's like highly claimed by the Christians there as their guy. So we were kind of looking for that.
Yeah, everywhere we went, we could spot Mark, and we also were in a church in Italy because our son is in school in Bologna, and then we saw a mosaic of the pigs jumping into the water, and we were like, there it is. So, and what's coming around is a papyrus that we bought. And that's a papyrus of Mark. We bought it in a Christian souvenir shop in Egypt. And you can see in that papyrus the lion, the lighthouse, and this claiming of Mark for Egypt. The other thing about Egypt, which was fun, is that, of course, the Holy Family traveled to Egypt. So there were lots of images of the Holy Family that we would come across in Christian communities. So once you know what you're looking for, you see it everywhere. So we're just passing that around. So yes, thank you. The idea that Christianity was brought to Egypt by Mark. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see your hand up in the back. Yeah, there's kind of an urgency to it. There's kind of and then right away he went to this, and immediately he ran here, and then immediately these sick people came, and then immediately they were casting out demons. There's this kind of intensity to it, not a real relaxed pace. Yeah, absolutely. Once you notice that, then you see it everywhere. Thanks. Other things about Mark or stories from Mark that were interesting to you? Mm-hmm. Use of parables? Yes, good.
And if I could maybe add to the parables, the parables about the wineskin, about the way things are being made new, the kingdom of God has arrived and is here. There's this new kind of cosmic entrance of God into the world with Jesus.
The sense that everything's changed, everything is new. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that this is going to be a tradition that's going to be bigger than its origins, for sure. Yeah.
I think the interesting thing for me was when you talked about Mark, you said we're going to hit the ground running, and by gosh, we did.
Yeah.
We started with the gospel, the baptism by John the Baptist, and off we went. It was like, you're right, we're just going to get down to business here and go.
Yeah.
Amazing to me.
Yeah, yeah. And thus, we don't get those Christmas stories.
No time for baby stories. We got to get into the hit the ground running. Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we start? I think some of these themes will keep coming back, even as we push further. So we're going to start today with chapter 6. Our hope is to get through the Herod, maybe even to the walking on the water. We'll see how far we get, but let's push forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening in chapter 6. So I'll read this first part, and then we'll pause and kind of reflect on it, and then we'll move on from there. Okay, chapter 6, verse 1. He departed from there, and again, as we've done before, as I'm reading, just listen, underline, make little notes to yourself, what stands out to you, even if you're not sure why. Just listen carefully. He departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place and among his own kin and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people, by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. So he's got some tensions at home, right, in the hometown. What do you notice that's going on in this opening of the chapter? Or what questions do you have?
And I might note that this is the only place where Jesus is called a carpenter. So we think of that and have that kind of strongly in our imagination of Jesus, but this is it. Is he not the carpenter?
He's not called that in the other Gospels.
Yeah. In Matthew, isn't he the son of the carpenter? So implying that Joseph, and it makes sense that Jesus would be too of his father, but this is the only place where Jesus is called a carpenter. That's something that we have kind of fixed in our minds about Jesus, and that's a contribution of Mark.
What do you think about this? Yeah. The question is this where that saying comes from? What do you think?
Yeah, so it's repeated this is actually repeated in all four Gospels, something like this. So this comes up, and then it appears to be something like there are parallels to it in ancient literature of people saying, no matter how much the world loves you, when you come to your own hometown, they don't care for you so much. So it seems to be like it's drawing on a bit of a traditional saying. And it's also a little bit awkward because Jesus is a little bit more than a prophet, but I think it's just meant as a saying that a prophet is recognized everywhere except his hometown. And so it's a traditional idea that is just kind of being applied to the situation.
Yeah, it might have been familiar. They never respect you at home. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we know you. You're just this guy from down the road. How could you possibly be the Son of God? And I find that really interesting, because would we recognize him, if he was from Appleton? Be hard. You're expecting this. So I think there's something very human about this that brings us to the level of him within his own community, within his own family, people saying, come on, Yeah, it's really interesting. What did you say? How hard it is to get past. Yeah, we knew you when you were a little kid. Come on, you're just a carpenter. How can you be the Messiah?
Why was he so amazed at that?
Why was Jesus so amazed at that?
Why did he even go there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it says he was amazed at their lack of faith, and apparently there was something that he found surprising about that. And even his family. So the Mark seems to be at pains to emphasize that the doubt wasn't just his own native place, like his hometown, but even among his family, there was, he wasn't taking seriously. Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary? And that's something that gets to be identified in this kind of patrilineal society. It'd be much more common to say the son of Joseph, the son of a father. And here he's identified as the son of Mary. And that's sidestepped by Matthew and Luke, by the way. Isn't he the son of the carpenter? Like, they don't go to son of Mary. And then we get these brothers, and the brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon, and are not his sisters with us? Then Jesus says, a prophet is not without honor except in his native place. That's fine. But then, and among his own kin and his own house. So there's a sense in which there's a kind of familial rejection here. Yes?
Prior to this, he performed some pretty amazing miracles. So were those people not there to see that? Is that why he said, or if they were, he was amazed at their lack of faith? Because if they'd been following him, they would have seen and heard of
Yeah.
the things he did prior.
Yeah, I think that's true, and maybe that's what he's amazed about. Is this the bigger story about Jesus? Is that word is getting out about him? He has these big crowds, really stupendous sizes. We're just about to see the feeding of the 5,000. 5,000 is more than a lot of these towns would have even had in them. So he's getting people from around the region who are following him, and it's a bit of a mystery why his hometown is like these. We saw this guy growing up. We're skeptical. It's somewhat mysterious why, but there's a sense that he's not embraced in his hometown and even among his wider kin.
I think the only way to answer that is to think about this as a real family and a real community, and we are mystified by the reactions of our neighbors and even our family members. I mean, we've all just come through the holidays, which is a stressful time for families. It's supposed to be happy, but we can't believe, that this person reacted to something we said and we didn't mean it, and they took it wrong. And to me, when I this just feels real. And I don't think there's a real answer besides our own experience in families and in communities where we are misunderstood all the time by each other. And even Jesus is misunderstood by the people closest to him. They don't see him for who he really is. And, he says he's amazed by their lack of faith. I don't think he means amazed in a positive sense. He's amazed they're treating him this way. How could they possibly? He is doing all these amazing things. He knows who he is, and these people are treating him with such disdain, disrespect, skepticism. So to me, it feels like he was a real person in a real community, and his people hurt his feelings. And I think we can relate to that, right? Many of us. So that's my answer, but I don't know if it's.
Did anybody outside of Mary and Joseph have any knowledge that Joseph didn't think he was the father?
Oh, you mean when Mary was pregnant and that whole story?
Is that a story that was around town?
Yeah, I don't know, and this is the earliest gospel, and I just think, I think there's two things going on here. It is really interesting that he's called the son of Mary because that was not usual. On the other hand, all these sisters and brothers make us as Catholics think, what is the status? Did he really, why are they saying this? And I think that the infancy narratives and the devotion to Mary are in such an early stage that we couldn't really know the answer to that. It's possible that there was some question around his, origins, but I don't, as far as I know, as a Marian researcher, that answer we can't definitively answer that.
Doesn't say Nazareth.
Right, interesting point, right? It says he departed from there and came to his native place. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, what we get different details from the Bibles, and so we would supply Nazareth because we know that's where Jesus came from, but it just says his native place here.
So I'm assuming that.
Yeah, so we would think, putting together our knowledge, we would say Nazareth, but Mark is just a little bit more generic, saying that, his native place. Yes?
I was trying to find it, but like, I thought, didn't we read in chapter 3 where his family
Yes.
was embarrassed
Yes.
by him? And so, I mean, clearly they've seen what he can do, and yet, and maybe that leads to why he's amazed by it, because they were there when he was
Yes.
doing amazing things, and they're still questioning or.
Right. So if you back, I think that was chapter 3. I think you're right about that. This is a theme in Mark, this kind of familial tension between Jesus and the rest of his family, those closest to him. And what Mark wants to emphasize is the new community of the church and the new wineskins. And when his family comes to try to get him because they're worried about him, Jesus, you'll remember, says, this is my family, those who follow me. And there again, he kind of leaves Mark gives the impression that his mother and broader family is worried about him, think he's maybe lost his mind in some way or other. And Jesus says, no, those who hear my words, this is my family. So thematically, Mark is downplaying the family and pushing up the new relationship of followers of Jesus. And he's not terribly concerned to defend or think more widely about Jesus and his family. Those themes that we love and know as Christians and Catholics, those are going to be really Matthew and Luke developing the family of Jesus and kind of finding a place for them. But Mark is certainly not kind of breaking in and defending Jesus' family. That's a little bit outside his purview. And if we think about Mark as being driven thematically by this kind of group of people under pressure, they want, and who have often cut off family ties in order to join this new group. Mark seems to want to emphasize that aspect of the ministry, that you may leave your past, you may leave your family. Even Jesus, in his hometown and with his family, they didn't always understand what he was doing or what he believed in. And so that's a kind of thematic emphasis that we get here in Mark.
Yeah, and it makes us uncomfortable because we like the mother and the child and the Holy Family and this warmth of this family, and we're not going to get that from Mark. We're going to have to go elsewhere for that. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means it's not Mark's concern. Yeah, Gary.
Okay, we have an online question from Ken Radke. He's down in Florida.
Oh, good.
And so Ken says, how old is Mark at the time you're discussing? But Mark wrote this gospel years after this occurred, right? So Mark isn't even here at the time, or was Mark present to see this?
The answer to that would depend on how we understand Mark. If Mark is someone who is maybe with Paul in Acts and on these early missions, yes, it will be a couple of decades after the death of Jesus that Mark is being put together. But it's hard to judge how old exactly Mark would be. But we can think of him as a young man in this early Christian movement, and then after reflecting later and putting together these stories.
Good. Okay. Should we keep going?
Yeah. Yeah, let's move to Herod. So I'm excited about talking about this story. It's a very strange story. It's a very salacious story because we get a head served up on a platter. And if you think about the Gospels, this is really an unusual moment because Jesus is off stage. John is also off stage, and we're taken into this banquet. So if we've seen this kind of new kingdom that Jesus is starting and that people are gathering around him, now put that to the side, and we're in the upper echelons of society at this time.
Yeah, and I just want to, Mark is really good, even with this pressure and urgency, at kind of constructing a narrative. So if you're a reader of fiction, like I am, you can see how there are, or even if you watch movies and TV shows, there are flashbacks and there are narrative segments and things, remember when we were talking about the 12-year-old girl and the woman hemorrhaging for 12 years. Those are sophisticated narrative techniques, and Mark has them, so whenever people say Mark is the simple version, I always push back on that because there's a complexity here. So we've been following Jesus around from here to there, and he's been healing people and casting out demons, and Martyn's right. Now we're getting into a story where Jesus is not present. And this story is a favorite of artists. So if you go home and you Google this, you will find some incredible paintings, Renaissance paintings of heads on platters. These are really, gruesome, and this is like a very compelling theme. And Mark, this story is in Matthew, and it's also in a very truncated version in Luke. But Mark's is the longest. Mark has the most detail. So we'll probably look a little bit at some of the others. But, Mark is giving us the full story here. So let's listen to this story and see what we can make of it.
Okay, so I'll read. This is the top of the second page, and we're going to start with Jesus sending out his disciples, and then we'll kind of read through this, then I'll kind of point out a couple things about the narrative here. He went around to the villages, so Jesus leaves his hometown, now he's going around to the villages in the vicinity teaching. He summoned the 12. You remember that's something we also came up with in the early chapters is there's 12 disciples, and those are named. And began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over unclean spirits. He instructed them to take nothing for the journey but a walking stick, no food, no sack, no money in their belts. They were, however, to wear sandals, but not a second tunic. He said to them, "Wherever you enter a house, stay there until you leave from there. Whatever place does not welcome you or listen to you, leave there, and shake the dust off your feet in testimony against them." So they went off and preached repentance. They drove out many demons and anointed with oil many who were sick and cured them. So we've seen this with Jesus. Now Jesus is kind of delegating his disciples to go out, and they're doing many of the same things, casting out demons, healing the sick. Okay, so that's then we get to note this transition to get to the Herod story. King Herod heard about it. For his fame, Jesus' fame, had become widespread, and people were saying, "John the Baptist has been raised from the dead. That is why mighty powers are at work in him." Others were saying, "He, Jesus, is Elijah." Still others, "He's a prophet, like any of the prophets." But when Herod learned of it, he said, "It's John, whom I beheaded. He has been raised up." Okay, now that's already happened. Herod is hearing about Jesus and about this ministry and what people are saying, and then he thinks to himself, this is John. So John has already been beheaded. So now Luke pushes us back into the past. Mark pushes us back into the past, and we get this story, something that could have happened several years earlier. It's unclear, but this is something that had already happened. Herod was the one who had John arrested and bound in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip, whom he had married. John had said to Herod, "It's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Herodias harbored a grudge against him and wanted to kill him, but was unable to do so. Herod feared John, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man, and kept him in custody. When he heard him speak, he was very much perplexed, yet he liked to listen to him. She had an opportunity one day when Herod, on his birthday, gave a banquet for his courtiers, his military officers, and the leading men of Galilee. Herodias' own daughter came in and performed a dance that delighted Herod and his guests. The king said to the girl, "Ask of me whatever you wish, and I will grant it to you." He even swore many things to her. "I will grant you whatever you ask of me, even half of my kingdom." She went out and said to her mother, "What should I ask for?" She replied, "The head of John the Baptist." The girl hurried back to the king's presence and made her request. "I want you to give me at once, on a platter, the head of John the Baptist." The king was deeply distressed, but because of his oaths and the guests, He did not wish to break his word to her. So he promptly dispatched an executioner with orders to bring back his head. He went off and beheaded him in the prison. He brought in the head on a platter and gave it to the girl. The girl, in turn, gave it to her mother. When his disciples heard about it, John the Baptist's disciples heard about it, they came, took his body, and laid it in a tomb. Then the apostles gathered together. So now, I just want to see the time frame here. Jesus sends out the apostles, they're doing great. We have to have a little bit of a time break. The word is getting around, and one of the people who hears about Jesus now is Herod. Now we have a flashback scene, which is actually quite extended, and then we come back, and we're going to get the feeding of the 5,000 as the disciples come back together after their ministry time. So really, for the first time, we've had a narrative which is this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and here there's a bit of a time gap where disciples are out, and after some unknown time, they come back together, and we fill that with this story, which is quite unique in the Gospels, of a beheading. Yes.
All right. So why don't you take some time at your tables, a few minutes, to react to this passage? What questions do you have about it? What strikes you as important or unusual or strange? And then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, and keep in mind, like, why this extended story? Like, what is the contrast that is being set up? There's really, I can't think of any other place in the Gospels where you get an off-screen, Jesus is off-screen, actually anyone who's sacred is off-screen. Why is this the story that needs to be here?
You two are wonderful, and one of the things.
Ready? All right. So what did you think of this story and the details, and just, what questions did you have? What stood out to you about John the Baptist, about Herod, about the story in general? Anybody? Yeah.
I keep thinking, so the girl, the daughter, who danced, and then she went and asked her mom, what should I ask for? Why? And so then the mom says, the head of John the Baptist, on a platter. Who does that? The British girls.
Yeah, this is, it's disgusting, right? And it's horrible in a lot of ways. So, this is a horrible dinner party. And I think that are a lot of little hints that give us the creeps about this dinner party, the more you look at it. So here we've got, you know what I mean? So here we've got a man, and this is his stepdaughter, and she's dancing and everybody likes it. And you know, this is not an innocent dance. No, they're not tap dancing, okay? So here is this kind of salacious dance that a young girl is doing. We can imagine, I think it's implied there's drunkenness here, right? You can have whatever you want. My whole kingdom, right? They're drinking. There's a salacious dance, but it's the stepdaughter. This is an awful thing. And Herodias is a bad woman in this story. Yeah, she's married her husband's brother, which she shouldn't have done. John is a righteous rule follower. You're sinning. And she's like, doesn't want to hear that. And so she comes up with this horrible plan in the middle of this sort of drunken party. So yeah, this is an awful story, you know, in these ways, you know, and that's, I think you're really right to pick up on that.
Back to your talk about the new skins and those things, so this could be like a synopsis of what the life is, and that change has to come. And then you're looking at, this is a definitive death for John the Baptist, so everyone knows that this gives more credibility to Jesus.
It accomplishes a lot, yes. So the first thing you said is that this is kind of the life that is going to have to be left behind, like this is the life of sin, right? And I think that's right. And then the second thing you said is that...
Yes, and if picking up on your note there about the definitive end, his disciples heard about it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Well, that's the language when Jesus died as well, but for John, it's the end. And we're left like, that was unjust, but he's gone, he's dead. And I think that cues us up for the death and being placed in a tomb of Jesus, but there will be the vindication of this whole thing. But John, is somewhat being put in his place. John died, but there's no possibility of he's dead. And Jesus is going to really be distinguished from John by the further hope after death that he can bring. Yes, and John.
You know, like we're talking about, I think this is just a reminder to us of the forces of evil and good. And evil is definitely at work.
Yes.
And those forces of evil are having an impact on human beings. They're dominating their actions, but at least having a major impact.
Yes, I think that's...
I'm reminded of where Jesus told us, the thief comes only for to steal and kill and destroy. But I have come that you might have life and have it to the full.
Yes.
I think it's just a reminder for us to say, hey, there's evil at work in this world. Don't be blind to it.
Yes. 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 Yes, I think, it's a reminder, Mark, it's very quick, but he spells this out to give us a sense of the real darkness, moral darkness that exists just off the screen as we're watching Jesus go around. We've seen demon possession, but this is this other kind of darkness that's out there, and it's a very vivid picture.
So, one's a question. Did they really bury his body till his head then? Is that what
Yes.
So, all right.
Yes.
But the other thing is, was it normal back in that time for them to assume someone could come back to life? Because I found this is,
Right.
So, I was trying to figure out, is Herod thinking that John the Baptist has come back and is now Jesus? Or is he thinking, this is my punishment, like, that I've had, I was uneasy when I did this, I shouldn't have done it, and almost, I don't know that he's repenting, but he's associating his bad action with what is happening now.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked in other passages about some of the almost horror motifs, right? And so here's Herod, clearly with a bad conscience. Mark shows us that Herod didn't want to kill him. John spoke out against Herod, but then Herod liked him, liked listening to him. So Herod is kind of conflicted. By the way, that's a Mark detail. Matthew makes this, John couldn't wait to kill him, or Herod couldn't wait to kill John the Baptist. But Mark is saying, no, there was some conflict here. And after he does that, it seems like he has a bad conscience because he's like, oh my, there's this person, Jesus, maybe that, and he doesn't know, but he's like, maybe that's John the Baptist come back to haunt me. And so that's how I hear that, is there's this bad conscience and a bit of a almost a kind of horror motif that he's worried about as a result of that.
I would say in terms of, this is a world charged with the supernatural and oftentimes a horrifying supernatural. So I think you're right to hear that, but so Jesus' resurrection is something else, right? Jesus is not a zombie, but I think the belief that people could not stay dead, that could be possessed, and all of those things would have been very common. And I agree with Martyn that that's probably the sense that he meant it. He didn't want to do this, and it was a horrifying thing, and now maybe he's going to be punished or haunted by it. That's what I think it means. Yeah.
Have there ever been raisings from the dead in the Bible of a broken body, a mutilated body, where they put it back together? That's why I say Jesus, they didn't break his legs, and he was then raisable because he had no, they stuck him with a spear and they broke his legs. They said no bones would be broken. And then John, his head was completely off. That made it impossible for Jesus to raise him then.
I don't think that we're meant to see that would have been impossible for Jesus. And Jesus was disfigured, but you're right. Jesus gets his own horrible death with the crucifixion. I don't think we're meant to think it was the type of death that distinguishes them. I think that this idea that the body is being carried to the tomb, the head being a mystery, right, is how that all happens. But I think subtly we're being said, John doesn't have recourse beyond this. He's dead. And that's going to set us up for, well, Jesus will be different than John. John had a popular ministry and had a widespread, people knew about him. Jesus had another kind of ministry. And when the bad ruler also puts him to a horrible death, there's recourse and hope after that. And John is just done here.
Okay, I'm going to try the mic again here, see if we get any feedback. I got a comment from Ken Racky in Florida. He says, to me, this is an example of evil overcoming good during an individual's lifetime, but the good ideas are carrying forward for the future of all people. That's an interesting statement, Ken. Maybe you should type a little bit more here and give us some more ideas on that.
That evil is overcoming good in this moment, but
Yes.
in the larger story, it won't.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, yes? Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
Right, the death of Jesus. And I think this is also, I mean, we go back to the very beginning of Mark and we start with John the Baptist. And I think, and we talked at that time that a lot of people, John the Baptist was extremely popular and was a contender for the Messiah job. You know, a lot of people were thinking he was the Messiah. And I think here you can see that audience of John the Baptist sympathizers is still being addressed, right? Do you know what I mean? So it says, that Herod feared John, knowing him to be a righteous man. He was perplexed, yet he liked to listen to him. He doesn't really understand, but he's not rejecting him. He knows that he's a righteous and good man. And if you look at Matthew, now Herod had arrested John. This is Matthew 14, where this story is, and put him in prison on account of Herodias. For John had said to him, "It is not lawful for you to have her." Although he wanted to kill him, he feared the people, for they regarded him as a prophet. Herod wants to kill him in Matthew. Herod does not want to kill him in Mark. So that John the Baptist is a good, holy, and righteous man is still in the minds of the audience for Mark. And I don't think the people who Mark is writing for are going to want to hear that John the Baptist was a fraud or something. So, you can really sense that.
When John confronted Herodess on this is wrong, you're sinning, and so she kind of held that to herself and waited for the opportunity to do him. And she saw this party with what Herod had proposed to her daughter. Says, "I'll give you anything." And then she goes running to her mother. Her mother sees that moment to, do this evil thing. And what did the daughter do? As soon as she got this head on her platter, she runs into her mother thinking, "Ooh, here, you wanted this." And I just like, there's just, I also wonder how did the daughter take this? I mean, how did that affect her?
It's a terrible, gruesome story. Mm-hmm.
And the unnatural details, the mother conspiring to get this head, the head coming to the daughter on a platter. I mean, the whole dance of your stepdaughter in this drunken party, the presenting of the head to the mother. I mean, the more you imagine and enter this quick story, the king drunkenly saying, "I'll give you anything you want, even up to half my kingdom." These are all amplifying the way this is a very disordered moment of darkness that is going to be the end of John. Uh-huh.
I think that also evil's out there and it's lurking and it's waiting for opportunity and we have to do it early.
Yes.
And Mark's world is a world where evil is out there, whether it's the man chained in the tombs or, it's there, it's close, right? That evil. And this story is another example.
Gary.
I guess I had to stop here for a second and confirm. John the Baptist and Jesus are cousins, are they not? Isn't Mary's sister Elizabeth John's mother?
Yes. Now that is going to be Luke's. Luke is the one who's going to give us that relationship, a kind of familial relationship between John and Jesus.
And then I've got one here again from Ken. He says, "It is quite interesting that the sequence of events follow the same in both the writing of both Matthew and Mark." Geez, Ken, I didn't know you were that learned.
Why don't we quickly look at the feeding of the 5,000, and that'll probably be as far as we can get. But I think it's interesting to hear the feeding of the 5,000 after the story of Herod and this drunken party, because as we're reading this story, we may not have a lot of time to talk about it, but note the details, the orders. There are going to be groups of 50 and 100. There's a kind of giving, demanding of the apostles to plan. Think about these people. You meet their needs, right? There's a kind of reversal in some ways. And so I think it's possible to see the feeding of the 5,000's place here as being a kind of godly supper, godly meal that Jesus is setting up. And we're meant to sort of see that contrast.
Yeah, Martyn used the word disordered, right? This dinner party is disordered. It's chaotic in every horrible sense of the word. And then we have another kind of meal here. And this story of the feeding of the 5,000 is one of the few stories that is in all of the Gospels, including John. And that is signaling the extraordinary importance of this. So do you want me to read it? Okay. Okay. The apostles gathered together with Jesus and reported all they had done and taught. He said to them, "Come away by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." People were coming and going in great numbers, and they had no opportunity even to eat. So they went off in the boat by themselves to a deserted place. People saw them leaving, and many came to know about it. They hastened there on foot from all the towns and arrived at the place before them. When he disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, for they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. By now it was already late, and his disciples approached him and said, "This is a deserted place, and it is already very late. Dismiss them so that they can go to the surrounding farms and villages and buy themselves something to eat." He said to them in reply, "Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, "Are we to buy 200 days' wages worth of food and give it to them to eat?" He asked them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 loaves and 2 fish. So he gave orders to have them sit down in groups on the green grass. The people took their places in rows by hundreds and by 50s. Then, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before the people. He also divided the 2 fish among them all. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 12 wicker baskets full of fragments and what was left of the fish. Those who ate of the loaves were 5,000 men.
Any thoughts about the story? We have just a few minutes here, but I think we all have probably heard this feeding of the 5,000, but thinking of it in this placement right after the Herod banquet, what strikes you? Yes, yes. The food is simpler. I mean, you can imagine at the Herod banquet, you'd have,
We don't hear about vats of wine. Simpler, orderly.
yes.
I was just gonna say, just the stark contrast between a gathering of evil and how they celebrate or whatnot, and this gathering full of miracles.
Yes.
And goodwill kind of thing with feeding people.
Yes, yes. And, it's an interesting question, like what makes this good? Why do we read the feeding of the 5,000 and see this as good? It's ordered. There's a sense of purpose. The disciples are like, send them out to get some food. And Jesus says, you feed them. It's your task. This is something that this is your ministry. You feed them. And then you can see also, I think, there's fish, but the loaves. And the loaves really attract the attention of Mark, in hindsight probably because of the Eucharist, right? The bread. And so there's a kind of, the fish kind of become an afterthought, and the narrator really wants to say, this language, looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples, right? That's
Like mass.
It sounds like mass. And I don't think that at the time, this was before Jesus had died, before the mass, but looking back on this event and this miracle, the gospel writer is kind of being drawn to add in this language of, whoa, look at this. This is this foretaste of the kind of new community that's going to be there, gathered around this kind of distribution of the Eucharist, of the bread. And so I think that leads the narrator to kind of downplay the fish a little bit. So he's divided, broke the loaves, gave them to his disciples to set before the people. Oh, and he also divided the 2 fish, right? It's a little bit like that detail isn't quite as interesting. Though that I would argue that he's there in memory, this is a kind of picture of the gathering of a new community and how exactly that's going to work.
Also, the second one is driven out of love.
Yes,
God, the apostles are concerned for the people, there's love in that.
yes,
And then Jesus leads them, there's love in that, whereas in the other one, it's based on hate.
yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if Herodias didn't instigate and get the banquet going for the purpose of killing John the Baptist. She got her daughter to get the dance ready, the whole thing speaks of this conniving.
A plot. Yeah, we're going to have a big birthday party, and you're going to have a great time, and I'm going to get this horrible thing. Mhm. Right. And this is not planned in advance, but managed with love rather than conniving and planned out of hate. Yeah, it's just the opposite.
Just a quick observation, too, I know we're close. So the contrast from the beginning where Jesus is amazed by their lack of faith, and here it's saying people are coming and going in great numbers. They see that Jesus is going to go off, and they still want to follow him. So just in that time, whatever they had done got people to want at least to listen, right?
Yeah. One last comment.
Is there any interpretation that part of the miracle was them sharing their 5 loaves and fishes allowed them to bring their secret stash out that they would have been for their personal selfish needs, and now sharing that with the 5,000? Therefore, at the end, they had more food than the 5 loaves. Everyone shared.
Yeah, so there was a movement in the 19th century of kind of liberal interpreters who were trying to kind of get some of the miraculous out of the Bible. And one thing that they proposed is this wasn't really a true miracle. This was just a matter of sharing breaking out among the crowd. So that was a kind of explanation. I would say that the miracle is very central to the gospel story, that Mark wants to emphasize that this was truly a miracle on its own terms. The story is that in the breaking of the bread, it was miraculous, and that's what accounts for this. If I think there's a lot of things that happen with these stories of Jesus where people are trying to de-miraculize. That's not a word, but and take away the miracle. But I think it's important to just stay with the story. This is the way Mark is presenting this, and he sees this as a miracle. I think we're out of time, though.
But I also think that it would be miraculous if people actually shared what they had. I like both. The idea that their hearts were moved to share what they were hoarding is I don't think that's read out of the story, but I do take the point that it's also meant to be seen as truly a miracle. We're past time, so thanks everybody.
Yeah.